Hello and welcome to Produce Talks, the CPMA podcast. I am your host and CPMA Education Manager, Jason Gorley. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know about an exciting development here at CPMA. In December, CPMA released an online certificate program called Produce Basics. These modules have been developed through industry consultations, an industry working group, and the CPMA Education Committee. You can learn more by visiting elearning.cpma.ca. This month on Produce Talks, we connect with Trent Smith, who is a project manager for the Veggie facility on the International Space Station. If you're not familiar with it, Project Veggie is a program currently being undertaken by NASA to learn how to grow and eat fresh fruits and vegetables in space. They've started with romaine lettuce, and as Trent explains, they are looking at experiments with other types of plants as well. Keep in mind when you're listening that Project Veggie has implications not only for long-term space travel, but for production here on Earth. Joining me today on the line, I have Trent Smith, who is a self-proclaimed NASA nerd, but he's also the project manager for Veggie. He's joining me today from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Trent, how are you doing? And thanks for joining us.
I'm doing well, and we have a beautiful Florida sunshine down here and a nice breeze up the Atlantic Ocean. And I definitely am a NASA nerd. Yeah, I'm the Veggie project manager, and it's been really exciting to get Veggie flown to space station, installed, and 2 crops of lettuce.
The space program's been around for a long time. So is this the first time that plants have been grown in space?
No. Plants have been grown in space for quite a while. The Russians have a long history of growing plants. We've been performing plant science for a while. However, this is the first time that we've grown plants in a way that the astronauts can see them easily. This Veggie system is a low-power, simple system. It's about 70 watts, and that runs the software, that runs the fans, the lights. The water is a passive system, so there's no pumps, there's no sensors or feedback system. So it's a very, very simple, low-power, collapsible system. And the idea was you just use your cabin air as your atmosphere for the plants. You know, the difficulties in growing plants in space is really because the root system needs air and water at the same time. One of my favorite examples I talked to many students, and Commander Hadfield, did you see the video when he rang out the washcloth in space?
I think almost every Canadian saw that video, yes.
Perfect. Well, so imagine, I don't know if you noticed that the water moved up to his hand.
Yeah.
So if water were to preferentially wet out a root, then the plant would go into a flood response, right? I mean, the plant's like, oh my God, it's a flood. And so controlling the water in space such that you maintain the balance between air and water is incredibly difficult. And I can't give enough credit to the science team that came up with the idea of using arsenite, which traps the air and holds the water at the same time. And what that does is that allows the root system to use the whole volume of the pillow. On the flip side, if you've seen astronauts ever lasso water in space, the water in air is just this sphere. So if you were to put water into a pillow, you could see maybe it would have this kind of wedge sphere in a corner, and the root system would never get to it. And then the plant would be in a drought response. It was like, oh my God, it's a drought. So getting that balance right is incredibly difficult. And then providing water to a growing plant, which starts out using little water, and then at some point hits exponential growth and really starts transpiring the water, is incredibly challenging, because you really need pumps and sensors. So doing that passively, I think, is one of the most fun challenges that we have with the Veggie team. We send up the seeds dry. When we prepare the plant pillows, we actually glue the seeds into the plant pillow, into the wick. We actually do glue 2 seeds per pillow. The type of glue we use is guar, which is a food-safe, non-toxic, very, very friendly system. Actually, if you go look at if you have ice cream in your freezer, you probably will note that one of the thickening agents is guar. So for our first crop, we actually had a little problem with the passive wicking system, which provides water. Didn't seem like it provided enough water for the growing plants, and we actually lost 2 plants. We had the astronauts directly inject the water into the plant pillows, which worked great. Saved 1 plant and kept the other 2 growing. For the lettuce, we actually have 6 plant pillows, and of the 6 pillows we sent up, we batted 500.
So you've kind of answered my questions about basics like soil and water. But what about light? Light must be different because it doesn't have an atmosphere to go through, right?
Well, on space station, we do have an atmosphere. We have air and humidity and carbon dioxide. So we have all the things that plants need and people need to survive. The difference is you can't use like a window because the space station goes around the Earth every 90 minutes. You'd have 45 minutes a day, and so think about that multiple times a day. You'd have a very confused plant or at least a plant which probably wouldn't be very productive. In lieu of using sunlight to grow the plants, we use very efficient light-emitting diodes, or LEDs. We use red and blue because that's really what the plants need. The red drives the photochemical process, or the photosynthesis process, rather, and then the blue is for the chemical processes the plant uses. We actually have some green LEDs in there, which the plants don't need, and that's really for the astronauts, so they can view the plants, take photos of the plants, and the plants look like plants. The astronaut schedule is so very busy. They exercise 2 hours a day. There's a number of experiments that they do through the day. They have this constant sunrise and sunset every 90 minutes. So for them, they kind of lose the passage of time. So caring for a plant over time kind of calibrates their passage of time and gives them a little piece of earth to take care of, too. I think maybe the sights and smells of a growing plant in this aluminum and plastic environment can be very helpful for morale and behavioral health aspects of the crew members.
It's interesting because we've just finished up a podcast with a project called Nemo's Garden. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's off the coast of Italy, and they basically have an underwater greenhouse going.
Oh, cool. No, I haven't heard of it. Definitely going to look it up.
It's really cool. And one of the things that they noticed is that germination time under the water, under greater pressure, was reduced. So I'm wondering, did you notice the germination time, or have you compared germination times in orbit with germination times on the Earth?
For us, the astronauts are about at 1 atmosphere, so the pressure should be about the same, and the carbon dioxide concentration on space stations is higher than it is here on Earth. I think on Earth it's about 350 to 400 parts per million, but on space station it ranges between 2 to even up to 5,000 parts per million. So when we run life science experiments on space station, we actually have chambers down here which exactly match the temperature, humidity, and carbon dioxide concentration. Because when we run a flight experiment, we want the only variable to be G. So you remove the G vector, well, we want to run our ground control, so all the other parameters are the same except for G. So we wouldn't see any germination effects, and we haven't. For the lettuce, we actually have 6 plant pillows, and of the 6 pillows we sent up, we batted 500. That's 3 plants for our first crop. Steve Swanson harvested those. We're not allowed to eat them by our flight docks. They weren't approved for consumption. He harvested the plants, wrapped them up in aluminum foil, kind of taco style, and inserted them into our Melfi freezer. And Melfi is basically a minus 80-degree freezer. They came home on the next SpaceX Dragon capsule back to Earth. We got those samples. We analyzed them for microbial populations, basically food safety. We performed mineral content. We measured the anthocyanin concentration as well as antioxidant capacity. I mean, the red romaine lettuce has a pretty good amount of anthocyanin, which is an antioxidant. For astronauts in space, the thinking is antioxidants will be helpful dealing with radiation.
So when you took it back for testing, was there anything different about the lettuce that was grown in orbit?
No, it was pretty similar. As far as food safety, it was about as clean, if not cleaner, than what you buy in the grocery store. So we collected all the data and presented it to the flight docks at Johnson Space Center. We got approval from the flight docks. We had to take it to a couple more boards and to a safety panel, and we got it all approved. And it was really, really exciting when we had the approval, and it's the first time that the astronauts have officially been approved to eat what they grew in space, really to eat the fruits of their labor. And the process by which we had to forge the process, too, in doing that. And once we had the approval and they were growing the lettuce, they knew they were going to eat it. And they took really good care of the lettuce. You know, it was just really phenomenal to watch Chell and Scott Kelly care for the plants.
It must have been kind of exciting for them to know that they were going to get to eat something that wasn't freeze-dried, right?
Yeah, I mean, the food that goes up it's good food, but many astronauts will tell you don't go to space for the food. So over time, having something fresh and crunchy, they love it, especially when they get, they send up fresh fruit when they get fresh deliveries from the Dragon or from the Cygnus or from the Russian vehicles. They're juggling oranges and things like that, and they eat it rather quickly. And so, when they're able to actually grow and eat it, it's even that much more exciting, I think, for them.
Who was more excited, the astronauts or the ground crew when they finally got to eat this salad?
I think it was a mix, because we do send notes to the crew members, and we kind of have a friendly competition between our ground control and their flight plants. And by the way, they won. They had really nice-looking plants on space station.
I have a question now that's kind of a two-part question, and it's just kind of formed as we've been talking, because one of the things I mentioned to you before we started recording was I wanted to know about how some of this research might be affecting production of crops back here on Earth. But then I started thinking, well, how much is what's happening on Earth how much could that be impacting your project as well?
Oh, so the information flows both ways, right? I mean, it absolutely does. There's actually a terrific partnership with Dr. Joy Amasa, Dr. Ray Wheeler, Dr. Howard Levine. I think Joy is going to a controlled environment conference here in the next year, and so she goes out and talks about what we're doing in space and learns from the controlled environment community what they're learning in lighting and growing the plants in these controlled environments. And so that really feeds back to, say, urban farms or warehouse farming or underground farming. There's a lot of countries and a lot of areas that don't have the benefit that we do of these very nice arable lands. Or, in the urban setting, maybe it costs you money on the electricity bill, but your productivity is increased. So there might be some trades that down the road, this warehouse farming or urban farming might tip the balance where that's a preferred way to go. And for us, because we're volume constrained, we're energy constrained, we're basically commodity constrained, right? Because everything we send up has a cost. And so we are very much about getting the most out of a plant that we can with the least amount of resources. And so what we learn, we certainly feed back to the scientific community and the controlled environment community. And what they also learn, they feed us. So it's definitely a symbiotic relationship.
And now it's time for a quick break to hear from CPMA Membership Chair, Les Mallard. But stay tuned, because on the other side of this, we're going to talk a little bit about Matt Damon. Les, I'm wondering if you can let me know some of the benefits that Chiquita has with being a member of CPMA.
Thanks, Jason, for this opportunity. The CPMA value equation spans many areas of interest for Chiquita. However, one of the areas of interest I want to key in on is the CPMA annual convention. The convention offers touch-point opportunities with all the major players in the Canadian produce industry in various settings, whether business or social. No other produce function in Canada offers the scope the CPMA annual convention offers. Having this is a tremendous value for our organization.
Thanks, Les. And now back to the conversation. We are CPMA, so I'm Canadian. So when Chris Hatfield came back to Earth after that last stint up there, I think a lot of people watched his return. And one of the things, it was really evident when he came back, was the toll that it takes on your body being up there that long. So was there a toll noticeable on the plants from being up there as well?
So from what we can tell, the plants look remarkably similar to our ground controls. And the crunch factor and the texture was very similar to what the crew remembered romaine lettuce from tasting. So it's hard to know without having real mechanical data on the plants. But from what we can tell, for lettuce anyway, there's minimal impacts of growing lettuce in microgravity. Now that's not to say that other plants might change the texture. You go to space, your body doesn't put so much energy into the bones because it doesn't need to. Right? Every time we take a step on Earth, we're building bone, and when we quit putting that compression on the bones, it triggers them to break down and not build so much. And plants are incredibly efficient that way as well. So if they don't need to have a very thick stalk, they won't put energy into it. It's going to be really curious. I'm very excited. We have some plans to grow tomato and veggie in the 2017-2018 timeframe, and these are dwarf tomato varieties. So we're very curious to see how they're going to do.
So how will that work in terms of pollination?
That's a great question, and we don't know. We don't yet know. Our thinking is the astronauts will be the bees, right? They're going to cross-pollinate the tomato plant, probably using a bee stick. But right now we're running kind of a precursor test. Kjell Lindgren is going to get going the third crop of Veggie 1, which is actually zinnia. And zinnia is a flower. And so what we're going to do with the zinnia is about a 60-day growth, and we're going to let it flower. So we're going to get data on a longer duration plant in veggie. The lettuce was about 30 days or so, and now the zinnia is 60 days. Tomato is going to be about 90 to 100 days. In addition to that, we're going to let it flower, so we're going to see, is pollen an issue? How does a flower, how does a plant like zinnia do flowering in veggie? And so the flowering plant's going to be advanced knowledge and inform us on what to do for a fruiting plant like tomato.
Yeah, I guess you're going to hope that nobody up there has an allergy at the time.
Well, and so it's funny because someone says, well, zinnia doesn't taste good, and then I think one of flight directors found recipes for zinnia. So we'll see if the crew members decide to taste the zinnia or not.
So you've mentioned tomatoes.
Yep.
So obviously you're looking at a longer scope, and I think I mean the vision for this is for longer term space travel, correct?
Oh yeah. Let me also back up a little bit. So Veggie 1 flew on SpaceX 3. We have a Veggie 3 experiment getting ready to fly on SpaceX 8. And what that is 12 pillows of Chinese cabbage. It's actually a Tokyo Bacana, which is a very tasty cabbage. And then 6 pillows containing the red romaine outrageous seeds. So we're going to send up 18 pillows, just like we did for Veggie 1, except Veggie 1 was 12 pillows of red romaine lettuce and 6 pillows of zinnias. So we're going to send up another crop ready for them to grow when they have time, and then downstream we'll do tomatoes. So the one common thing you'll note is that these are all kind of pick and eat type of plants, right? You can cut a few leaves of the lettuce and then let it keep growing, and over time you can build a salad, cut and come again kind of thing. Tomato, you can take a few tomatoes off at a time and come back again. So none of these crops that we're talking about require cooking. Now downstream, to get a microwave on space station, we can grow maybe potato or sweet potato. I am kind of excited about sweet potato. I think sweet potato would be great in space because it has a nice taste, and they can kind of flavor it up how they like.
So they're still probably a long way from being anywhere close to some sort of self-sufficiency once they're up there, right?
Yeah, so right now we are learning how to grow the plants in microgravity, not kind of farm them in a sustainable manner. But that would be the long-term goal. How would you compost in space? How do you make sure that your dust and dirt stay where you need it so you don't contaminate your electronics? So on the way to Mars, you're growing plants on the way to Mars and composting on the way, or recycling the inedible plant mass in a way that makes sense. There's a number of teams working on that, and so we're focused on kind of the food production. What do the plants need to grow? And that way, when we can understand what the plants need to grow, then you can figure out, would you use a biochar? Would you compost? Would you use a combination of that? And would you use media like we do now? We use an arsenite, which is that clay media I mentioned. Or would you use hydroponics? Or would you use aeroponics? And so those are all trades that get made downstream. But first we need to understand, can you grow these plants in microgravity, and what do you need to grow them?
Before I let you go, I have one more question to ask, and it's kind of slipping into pop culture. So there's a movie that's come out recently called The Martian, where Matt Damon gets stranded somewhere, and he gets stranded on Mars, and to survive, he starts growing potatoes using Martian soil and some of his own waste. So what I'm wondering about is the science behind that sound, like, is this realistic, or is this way out there?
So I'm a chemist by training, but by education. I've learned a lot from our plant biologists. Assuming that the regolith has been, doesn't have any perchlorates, right? It's just this inert media which holds water, and assuming all the macro and micronutrients are there in his waste to support the potato plant, right? So you got to kind of have this forward-leaning thought. So yeah, it could happen, but there's always things that can go wrong. But I think for the most part, that's doable. I think the least likely thing is to have a windstorm tear apart structures on Mars, because it's got very, very little atmosphere.
Well, thanks for being here, Trent. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again.
And that's all that we have for you this month on Produce Talks. I'd like to thank Mr. Trent Smith and everyone at NASA who took the time and energy to connect with us and make this podcast happen. The music that you're hearing on today's podcast is called Clap and Yell, and it's from bandsound.com. I'd also like to thank you for listening. And we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us by emailing podcast@cpma.ca. You can also subscribe to the podcast and leave reviews on several podcast catchers. For instance, if you are on an Android device, you can find us on Stitcher. Just search for Produce Talks and subscribe. If you have an idea for a podcast, we'd love to hear from you too. There is a web form available on cpma.ca on our podcast page. Just fill it out, and then we'll take it from there. All right, so that's it. Until next time, make a healthy choice. Fill half your plate with fruits and veggies.